Hi guys! Okay, so today we have a true crime case, a word in Romanian, and I will also be doing my makeup at the same time. So the word for today is regim de teroare. Regim de teroare. Regim de teroare. Well done guys, you just said reign of terror. Now, I just want to give you a warning. In today's case, I will be covering animal assaults as well, so just a warning from the beginning. In the remote wilderness of Canada, a charismatic man gathered followers for what became known as the Ant Hill Kids Cult. On the outside, families enjoyed an idyllic rural lifestyle together in a close-knit religious community. But behind closed doors, unthinkable attacks, violence, and mind control were daily realities under the rule of Roch, a self-proclaimed prophet and savior to his followers. And I'll go through with you guys the hidden horrors life inside of this cult as told through the memories of survivors and former members. Stories of physical mutilations, children tortured for perceived sins, something that's almost just too shocking to believe. But believe it because this man convinced his followers that he was God on earth, and over 2 decades he acted as judge, jury, and punisher over what some would call a reign of terror. Roch, and I'm hoping his name is right, although it doesn't really matter, he used terrifying methods to command absolute authority and obedience. He maintained totalitarian control over every aspect of members' daily lives, even while wanted by authorities, as his experiment in extremism continued for years, largely off the grid in secret forest encampments. And I know I'm not covering very often cults, but yeah, this is another one of those cults. And I'm sure that, you guys, if you follow true crime in general, there are so many out there. So I guess that, we should start from the beginning. Roch Terold, whatever his name is pronounced as, was born on May the 16th, 1947, in the Saguenay Valley of Quebec, Canada, into a French-Canadian family. He was the second of 7 children, and he was the eldest son, born to Hyacinthe and Pierrette Terol. The family moved to the Thetford mine community in the Eastern Township when Roch was 6 years old. The town had one local school which only had classes up to the 7th grade. Even though Roch was full of promise and he was also really hungry to learn, he never went any further with his education, and this would be the same with the rest of his siblings. Roch was raised in a devout Catholic family, serving as an altar boy during his childhood. But Roch's mom, Hyacinthe, was a devout member of the Catholic fascist group called Union of Electors, also known as the White Berets, for the headgear worn by the members. After attending Mass on a regular basis as a boy and forced by his father to spread the gospel by knocking door to door of the local residents, Roch developed an intense hatred for the Catholic faith. But it wasn't only Catholicism that he didn't like, he actually hated organized religion as a whole. The family had a simple life in Thetford mines, but as a teenager, Roch really wanted more attention. So he came up with some ideas to get more. He started complaining about his childhood just to get sympathy. Roch described his father as an abusive man, but his mother denied the accusation. Roch carried on accusing his parents of all kinds of things, and it was clear that he really just craved attention. He chose specific topics of conversation, read up on them, then he gave the impression that he was really intelligent. After he stopped attending school, Roch taught himself the Old Testament, and he began to fixate on the idea that the world was coming to an end. So he converted to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and followed their rules very closely. This meant no smoking, no junk food, no alcohol, and no drugs. As a young adult, Roch replaced Christianity with his own set of spiritual beliefs. He viewed himself as a prophet and a guru who deserved devotion and obedience. On November 11, 1967, Roch married Francine Grenier, a girl from a nearby town. Once they got married, they moved to Montreal and they had two sons, Roch Sylvain and Francois. While in Montreal, Roch developed ulcers, which led to him needing surgery. But because of complications, he was left with permanent discomfort. So, you can imagine that he wasn't the happiest. Because of his health problems, he became obsessed with health and medicine. This is when he extensively learned about human anatomy, something which is really important, so please guys make a note of it because he will be using this later on to a horrific level. 3 years after they moved away, Roch moved with his family back to Thetford Mines and he started improving his woodworking skills. He actually used this as an excuse by saying that he needs to travel to Quebec City to sell his woodwork, but he just wanted to get involved with women that he would meet there. One of these women, Giselle LaFrance, would become one of his first cult members. To no surprise, woodwork sales didn't really bring enough money to support his life back in Thetford Mines, and sadly, the local credit union took possession of the house. With this, his wife Francine separated from him and Roch carried on his relationship with Giselle. By this point, he was no longer a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He was actually kicked out after he tried to take over the leadership of the church. And that's how I guess all cult leaders begin, don't they? His magnetic personality and outspoken manner made others in the church uncomfortable, so he was asked to leave. Roch believed that the end of the world was near and it would be brought on by the war between good and evil. By the mid-1970s, Roch's belief of being a God-sent savior grew, and he started recruiting people to join in his religious movement. He was a charismatic speaker, and he was also a charming man, so, this kind of came naturally for him. So, in 1977, he formed the cult in Sainte Marie, Quebec, named the Ant Hill Kids. The first members of the cult ranged in age from 18 years old to 24 years old, and Roch himself, he was 30 years old at the time. His followers at the beginning were Solange Boillard, Chantal Labrie, Francine Laflamme, José Pelletier, Jacques Fizet, Claude Olette, and Jacques Giguère, and his partner Maurice Grenier, with their 6-month-old baby girl. Roch wanted to start a free-thinking commune where people would live freely, in unity, equality, be free of sin, and listen to his teachings. But this would very soon change. Roch didn't allow his followers to have any contact with the outside world, including their families or the Seventh-day Adventist Church. For the next few months, Roch became more and more convinced that the end of the world is near, specifically that the world will end in February 1979. He told his followers that God warned him and told him to prepare himself and his followers for the end of the world. So in 1978, preparing for this end of the world, Roch moved his commune by hiking to a mountainside named by him as Eternal Mountain, near Gaspé village of Saint-Jacques, where he claimed that all of the members could be saved. When he moved to this Eternal Mountain, Roch had 17 members in his cult, 4 men, 9 women, and 4 children. Roch was relaxed and just watching the members work like crazy. He barely lifted a finger. The members of his cult started building an entire town from scratch. The name of the cult was actually based on the idea that the group would work together in unity, just like ants in an anthill. They first built a large communal cabin, and the members would be working 17-hour days to clear the land and bring supplies from the nearby town. But not Roch himself. Oh, of course not. He just sat there, relaxed, and he just watched everybody else. Claude Olette and Jacques Fizet were the ones having to dig a hole where the center of the cabin would be so that they can have a well. They dug and dug the whole summer before they finally reached water, and Roch declared this a miracle. Of course, that like in so many other cults, they didn't really have very much food. They only ate fruits and vegetables from their garden, and any other food was heavily rationed. The members were actually malnourished, they were weak, but they couldn't really complain because if they did, Roch would cut their rations even further. One of the members, Maurice, was pregnant, and during one mealtime she ate 2 more pancakes than what her ration was. And because of this, Roch punched her so hard in her side that he broke 2 of her ribs. Some members actually got fed up of this treatment, like Yolande Guinbert. She managed to escape by claiming that her passport was expired, so she needed to go back to France. Another man, Leo Marc Fauchet, who joined with his wife and child, they packed up and they left as well, although they gave Roch all of their money. Roch didn't try to stop them from leaving, but this was just at the beginning. Roch gave all of the members new names from the Old Testament. He became Moses, and he ordered his followers to call him Papi, and Giselle, his partner, she was Mommy. A lot of the members, they still received welfare checks, but they actually shared them with the whole group, providing a monthly income of 1,400 Canadian dollars, which is around 1,000 US dollars. By September 1977, the construction on Eternal Mountain was finished. The cabin was a simple single room with a well in the middle. The roof consisted of moss-covered logs, and the rooms were meter-high partitions with bed sheets acting as curtains. And then something else happened. In November 1978, the Jonestown massacre in Guyana became known all over the world. And of course, Roch, he saw this as well. And he actually showed particular interest, claiming that he had a vision of this happening the previous year. But he never mentioned such a vision before to anyone. The Jonestown massacre really had an effect on the Anthill kids. Families of group members began trying to disrupt things for Roch. So authorities, they became aware of the commune, but they didn't really have any evidence that Roch was causing harm on anyone, so they couldn't just, go ahead and arrest him. But Roch actually volunteered to talk to the police. He underwent a physiological evaluation, and he told them that he wasn't the leader of the group. He said that they were a democracy and they were just living peacefully. But this wasn't true. Maurice, one of the members, she became really anxious and she begged her husband to live with her. So then her husband, Jacques, told Roch about his wife, and that was when he instructed Jacques to chop off one of Maurice's toes with an axe. When Jacques didn't really want to, Roch told him, "What are you, a faggot? Don't you have any balls? If you want to be a man, you have to learn how to teach your woman a lesson." Roch then picked up the axe and raised it over Maurice's foot, threatening to cut off every single one of her toes. In the end, Jacques gave in, and he actually, check this out, he chopped off his wife's pinky toe. This was the moment that Jacques became Roch's puppet. He became his right-hand man. And let's not forget that very soon the world will end, right? It was at this point that Roch became focused on increasing the size of his cult, so he declared all of the marriages except for his and Giselle's null and void. He then decided to marry all of the women in the commune, conducting the ceremonies himself. As soon as they were married, of course, he had sex with all of them and he continued sleeping with his wives until they fell pregnant. In total, Roch fathered 26 children with the 9 female members of his cult. When the cult would have visitors, they would only see harmony. Roch's wives would serve natural and organic food, and a large group of children would be very well behaved. From the outside looking in, it seemed like a peaceful setup, a religious group living an alternative lifestyle. Even though it looked strange, they seemed to be God-fearing people living off the land, with all of the members choosing to live there of their own free will. But you guessed it, when the visits would be over, everything would change. Roch would start drinking, and the members, they were really scared of his violent outbursts, so they did whatever was needed to just keep Roch happy. They wouldn't really try to escape because they've seen some of the examples. Those who tried running away before were ordered to break their own legs, just like Jacques and his wife. In February 1979, when the apocalypse should have happened and it didn't, Roch explained to his followers that there was a difference between the Roman Catholic calendar and the Israelite calendar, and that the end of the world was still coming. And his followers actually believed him, which was shocking for their families. The parents of Chantal Labrie got a court order to get psychiatric testing done on their daughter, but when police officers showed up at the commune, Roch denied them access. A month after the apocalypse, Quebec's newspaper Le Soleil published an article on the group titled "They are happy and free to live if they wish." This article actually got the interest of the local police, and 10 police officers went on the mountain in a helicopter a few days later. Roch was arrested for obstruction of justice, and he was ordered by the court to have a psychological evaluation. While he was away, his wife Giselle kept up the morale of the group. The families who knew Roch was removed tried to visit during this time, but they were made to feel very unwelcome. Meanwhile, being away didn't really stop Roch from trying to charm people, and he even tried it with the doctors. Nobody was really safe from him. He told the doctors that he rescued many of his members from a life of drug and alcohol addiction, and he was actually helping them. He offered them a place to live within a wholesome community. The hospital director even started calling Roch Moses and expressed his contempt at the public's unfair assumptions about the man who just chose to live a different lifestyle. Roch was in fact released from the hospital earlier than expected, and he was deemed fit to stand trial for his obstruction of justice charge. He received for this 1-year suspended sentence. Then, suddenly, the media completely changed their portrayal of Roch. They would paint him as just a gentle mountain man who just wanted to get away from the harsh side of modern society. To his followers, this only strengthened their belief that he was a good leader. Soon after everything, Roch gave up his strict Adventist diet. He started eating meat, he started drinking milk, eating cheese, and junk food again. He also, of course, started drinking again after being sober for 2 years. When he drank alcohol, he would force everyone to gather around him, and he would deliver his drunken sermons for hours on end. If any of the members would, God forbid, fall asleep, he would hit them over the head with a club. The followers were also made to wear identical tunics to represent equality and their devotion to the commune. At the beginning of November 1980, a new member joined the group, the first new member since 1977, and he was called Guy Vier. Guy was actually at the same hospital that Roch attended, and he was being treated for depression. He first heard about Roch on TV and he was drawn by his story and his message, so he went to Eternal Mountain. He had to pass an examination before being invited to live there. But Guy, he wasn't allowed to live in the main cabin. His accommodation was a tool shed where he was given a wood stove, bottles of homebrewed beer, some chickens, and one meal a day. Guy was given the job to look after the 3 children that were not Roch's children, on top of the usual chores like chopping wood or carrying on the construction of Roch's wooden palace. The children Guy had to babysit were 2-year-old Samuel Giger, 4-year-old Miriam Giger, and 2-year-old Simon Olet, who came from Solange and Claude's short-lived marriage. On March 23, 1980, Roch planned a party. 12-year-old Roch Jr. and 10-year-old Francois from Roch's marriage to Francine, his first marriage and his first children, were invited to attend the party, and they were going to move into the commune permanently. But Guy wasn't allowed to attend this party. He was meant to look after the outsider children. But something happened that night. According to court records, Samuel was crying and he was keeping Guy from sleeping, which made him quite angry. Guy then lost his temper with Samuel and he started screaming in his face, telling the boy to be quiet. When Samuel wouldn't stop crying, Guy picked him up by the throat and punched him in the face multiple times. Apparently, the following day, Roch found out and he asked Gabrielle, who was considered to be the nurse of the group, to take care of Samuel. The report claimed that Samuel's head was floppy and his penis was swollen. So what did Roch decide to do? He took a pair of scissors and he cut open Samuel's penis to allow his urine to flow out. Sadly, poor Samuel was found deceased the following morning. He was only 2 years old. But Giselle allegedly had a different version of events. She said that Samuel's face was bruised on the morning of March 24th, but his head wasn't flopping around. He wasn't seriously ill until Roch got involved. And Roch just decided that Samuel needed to be circumcised. When he performed the circumcision, he used a razor which was sterilized with alcohol. He also gave Samuel the same solution to drink to act as an anesthetic. Samuel sadly died the following day. His cause of death could have been complications from the circumcision or from alcohol poisoning. Maurice Grenier was informed about her son's death, but by this point she just went about her daily work. That night, Roch said that they should burn Samuel's remains, which his parents both agreed to do. Claude Olet was the one in charge of burying him, and once it was finished, everything just went back to normal as if nothing ever happened. But by September 1980, Roch's drinking was just getting out of control. One night, whilst drunk, he had an argument with Guy and decided that he had to be punished for Samuel's death. To make it somehow fair, Roch decided that Guy would stand trial for his actions. But not in the legal system as you would think. Oh no, they would have their very own trial on Eternal Mountain. Samuel's father was the judge, Giselle was the prosecutor, Claude was Guy's lawyer, Gabrielle was the coroner, and Roch's remaining 6 wives would be the jury. The proceedings lasted 1 hour before a verdict was reached. This actually didn't satisfy Roch at all. After considering his options, he approached Jacques a few hours later and said that they should just castrate Guy. Jacques was reluctant, but Roch issued another vote. This time, a jury of 10 was called, which included Roch's young son, Roch Jr. 3 of the 10 voted against the castration, and the other 7 agreed that castration was a suitable punishment. Guy didn't plead his case, he just remained silent. When the verdict was read, Guy was upset, and of course that he opposed the verdict. But somehow, Roch was able to convince Guy to just go along with it. He actually convinced Guy that, yeah, he should get castrated. Roch told him that his headaches and his respiratory issues would be miraculously cured. He then went on to explain the group structure. According to him, Guy was a slave, and if he was castrated, he would be promoted up a level. Guy was asked to lie on the kitchen table, doubled up as a slab for surgery, while Gabrielle got some medical equipment: an elastic band, a razor blade, a pair of tweezers, a magnifying glass, and ethanol. The operation apparently was painless, and Guy actually recovered. And guess what? He never ever complained again of any headaches. Now, honestly, I don't know if he was cured or not. I highly doubt it happened. I think that it's more likely that he was terrified to complain of any other headaches. Even if Roch promised him that he will go up in rank, he never moved up. It actually seemed like he got it even worse. Roch would use Guy as his punching bag, bullying him and making the other followers do things to him, like trying to stab him in the chest with knives. On November the 5th, 1980, Guy thankfully managed to escape, and he traveled to the nearby village of Saint Jogues. He started telling villagers about a child who died after he was kicked by a horse. As soon as police heard this story, they invaded the commune and arrested Roch and both of Samuel's parents. Police uncovered Samuel's remains, and the members were very quick to blame Guy for Samuel's death. Authorities removed 7 children from the compound and placed them into foster care. Their parents were given the opportunity to regain custody of the children on one condition: only if the parents left the commune. But sadly, all of the parents decided to just give up their children and stay behind with Roch in the commune. A coroner examined Samuel's remains and concluded that his death was not accidental. Roch, Terol, Jacques Giguère, Maurice Grenier, Gabriel Lavallée, and Guy Vier were charged with being criminally negligent and causing bodily harm to Samuel. Claude Ollet was charged with obstruction of justice for burning Samuel's remains. There were some other charges for other members, like neglect of their own children. No one pleaded guilty to the charges. Jacques, Maurice, Claude, Solange, and Guy were released on the condition that they do not return to the cabin at Eternal Mountain. Roch was denied bail because he was considered to be a danger to society. After a 9-month trial, all the charged members of the Ant Hill Kids were found guilty. Maurice and Solange were handed a 3-year probation. Jacques and Claude got 6 months in prison and 3 years probation. Guy was initially sentenced but later acquitted because of his mental issues and placed in Robert Giffard Hospital. Gabrielle was sentenced to 9 months in prison and 3 years probation. Roch was given 2 years in prison and 3 years probation. He was moved to Orsainville Detention Center in Quebec City. But even though Roch was in prison, the members still wanted to be close to him, so they managed to find 4 apartments in Quebec City. At Eternal Mountain, police burned the cabin down and bulldozed what was left. So it looks like that's it, right? Ant Hill Kids cult is no more. Oh, but no, you're so wrong if you think that. Now, I didn't know where to add this in, but I will tell you now. Roch's wives, they actually wrote some letters to him. I don't know if he was whilst he was in prison or still in the commune, I'm just not sure. But I'm going to read you a letter from one of them just so you can see what a hold he has on these members. Quote, "Hello puppy, I'm writing about what you said on the subject of nutrition. It is very true that I nibble. A damnable fault which I will never again repeat. The thought of ingesting such a large quantity of food in so little time discouraged me, even if I work outside the entire day without eating. I ask you to forgive me. If it is stealing, I did not realize. It is this fault that causes my plumpness. I don't want to be a fat and plump servant. That is too ugly next to the man that you are. I don't know what to think about everything and the meaning of my actions. I only know that I will not repeat them. And I don't speak lightly. I wish to be a true servant to you, my master. Alert, vigorous, with a clear and lively spirit, and well balanced to serve you every moment of my life. I have a long way to go. Thank you, Papi. I love you, Hogla. End of quote. That just sounds completely horrendous, really. Roch was released from prison in February 1984. His members, who had stayed loyal to him, thought that they could all rent a house in the city together, but Roch had other plans. Something he planned while he was in prison. They would just start over and build their commune up from the ground somewhere else. So, the group actually traveled back to the wild and they found land in Somerville Township, Burnt River. Somerville was close to the town of Lindsay in Victoria County, Ontario. Whilst he was in prison, Roch became sober and he promised his followers that there would be no more violence. By May of that year, the group settled at Burnt River and they started building their new home. Roch actually had a vision for their commune. A two-story A-frame cabin with a kitchen, a bakery, a maple sugar shack, a smokehouse, a stone altar where he could communicate with God. All of this was supposed to be built by the remaining 2 men and 9 women, 4 of which were heavily pregnant. There were also 10 children still there, but Roch just wanted their new home built. People in Somerville would occasionally visit, but Roch made sure that the cult's dark side was never revealed, and the locals were not aware of the history in Quebec, and they thought that Roch and his friends were just, some odd neighbors. They seemed like hardworking people and completely harmless. In Victoria, the Anthill Kids were considered an institution, not a family. This meant that the group no longer received welfare checks. Because they needed money, Roch told his wives to start stealing from the local grocery store in Lindsay. They would steal milk, vegetables, toilet paper, and everything else they wanted or needed. They even modified their clothing, creating huge inner pockets to carry and hide anything that they shoplifted. Jacques Giguère was caught shoplifting on January 31st, 1985 by a local police officer. Gabrielle, Claude, Nicole Ruel, and Roch Jr. were found waiting close by. Between them, a total of over $450 worth of items were stolen. They were never formally charged, but they were banned from shopping in Lindsay ever. So they were banned forever. Roch even made his followers contact their parents for money, and if the parents refused, he would further push the idea that they were unloving, unhelpful, and just hateful people. Because the group was so desperate to make some money, to bring in some income, they sold baked goods and fruits, which gave them quite a good source of income. When Roch saw the potential, he created a company which he called the Anthill Kids. Roch was sober, but he didn't stay like that for very long. When he was bored, he drank, and when he drank, he became a sadist. He kept his followers physically and mentally weak, making them easy to control. One of Roch's new rules was that his followers were not allowed to speak to the other members without his permission. They were also not allowed to have sex without asking him first. He introduced gladiator tournaments where he would have members get into a dirt ring and fight each other. Sometimes the women were made to wrestle each other while they were naked just to entertain Roch. I guess you can say that Roch was getting out of control. He became convinced that his followers wanted to leave. So he had to show that he was in control. He picked a favorite wife for some time, which would cause distrust and jealousy among the other members. This assured Roch that he would always be the one in control and his followers wouldn't unite to overthrow him. Over time, his methods became even more sadistic. He no longer beat the members with belts, but now he used hammers. When Roch suspected that someone wanted to leave, he would relentlessly punish them. He would hang the person from a ceiling and pluck hairs from their body one by one. Then he would defecate on them. He convinced his followers to break their own legs with a sledgehammer to prove their loyalty to him and the cult. He made them sit on lit stoves, shoot each other in the shoulders, cut off each other's toes, and rub feces on one another. The children would be stripped naked and beaten, and if one of the children misbehaved, Roch would pin them up against a tree, nail their clothing to the trunk, and make the other children throw rocks at them. One evening during a freezing winter, one mother, who was one of Roch's wives, was forced to leave her crying baby outside, baby Eliezer Lavalley, to protect the baby from abuse. Sadly, though, the baby died of hypothermia. And I believe that this baby was a newborn. The death of that baby led law enforcement to investigate the neglect of children. In 1987, 14 children were placed in foster care. Even though there was clear abuse, Children's Aid only wanted to remove the children from the commune. They didn't really want to press any charges. So the cult just carried on with 2 men and 8 women. When the children were removed, Roch was very angry and he became even more violent. When he was drunk, he liked playing doctor with his followers. One day he got really angry at Claude Olette. No one knew the reason why. So he just punished him. He had to walk around with an elastic band wrapped around his scrotum. He had to keep the band on overnight, which caused extreme damage to his testicles. So Roch played the doctor again. He grabbed the razor blade and opened Claude's scrotum, removing the infected testicle with his hands. He then cauterized the wound with a burning hot iron. Roch continued to target Claude and tried to have the group vote if they should stone Claude to death. Fortunately for him, the group voted against it. Roch wasn't happy at all. He threatened to cut Claude's stomach open. Seeing this escalating violent behavior, Claude escaped into the woods where he would wait for Roch to calm down and sober up. This became a common tactic of all the members just to avoid his wrath. One night, Roch threw a knife at Giselle, his wife, which hit her in the thigh. The wound bled heavily, but Roch didn't help her at all and instead just asked her to go to sleep. After 2 hours, a large scab formed on Giselle's swollen leg. And of course, Roch decided to play the doctor yet again. Giselle was made to lie down on the kitchen table, where he reopened the wound and poured hot water over it. Later, when the wound became infected, he rubbed in salt and olive oil to cure the infection. Surprisingly and by a miracle, luckily Giselle's leg healed. As soon as she recovered, she tried to escape and went to stay with her father for a couple of days. But she was so brainwashed by Roch that she just went back to him. In September of 1988, Solange was feeling sick. Roch told her that something was wrong with her liver and of course that he needed to operate. So one day he got even drunker than usual and decided that it was time for Solange's treatment. He led her to the kitchen and made her strip naked and lie down on a table. He tried to give Solange an enema with a plastic tube, trying to fill her up with molasses, oil and water. He then punched her in the stomach repeatedly. As a reflex, she put her hands up in defense, but when Roch told her to put them down, she listened to him. Then he placed the tube down her throat and made everyone in the group blow into it. All of this was only in preparation for the surgical procedure. He didn't even start yet. Roch made a large incision on Solange's side just below her ribs. He placed his hand inside her, rummaged around her intestines, and pulled out a piece of tissue. Confident that he just healed her, he said, "There, you are going to be alright." Roch then ordered one of the other members to stitch her up, then he made her get off the table. She was unsteady on her feet, so he told her to go and have a hot bath, then a cold bath, then a hot bath again. But nothing made Solange feel better. She went to lie down, and after a very short time, blood was pouring out of her mouth, and Solange sadly passed away. Doctors would later say that she died because of digestive fluids leaking into her abdominal cavity. After the death of Solange, Roch was devastated. He tried to end his life by drowning, overdosing on Tylenol, and he even asked Jacques to shoot him, but Roch survived all of these suicide attempts. His mental health also deteriorated, and over time he was convinced that he was pregnant with Solange. A week after she passed away, Roch had yet another revelation. He would bring Solange back to life. He ordered one of the members to exhume her body. Gabrielle had to open her up and pour vinegar inside her body to preserve her organs. Solange was then returned to her grave, but she was then dug up a second time when Roch said it was time for her resurrection. Solange's body was laid out on the kitchen table. Jacques was ordered to drill a hole in her skull. Roch then ejaculated into the opening, and he encouraged the other men to do the same. According to this crazy, unbelievable master plan, Roch believed that the semen would bring Solange back to life. But obviously she remained dead. Roch was very upset, and his followers decided it would be best to burn her remains. Before they did that, however, Roch removed one of her ribs. From that day on, he wore the rib in a leather pouch around his neck. Now, if you are religious, you know that in the Genesis, God created Eve by taking her from the rib of Adam. Maybe that's what, Roch was hoping to achieve. I don't know, but he's just mad anyway. 2 months after Solange's death, another member had a health problem. Gabrielle Lavallee complained of a sore tooth. Now Roch was a dentist as well. His answer was ripping out 8 of her teeth with pliers. Later that evening, he chased Gabrielle around with a knife and managed to cut one of the tendons in her hand. But Gabrielle still remained loyal to Roch. Over the years, she suffered horrific abuse at his hands, including a blowtorch held to her genitals and a hypodermic needle being placed in her spine, which broke off while still inserted. Gabrielle tried to leave the cult on previous occasions, but she returned after she was unable to live without them. In July 1989, Gabrielle complained that her hand was stiff. Roch pinned her hand to the kitchen table with a knife and decided to amputate her arm. Some reports say that he used a meat cleaver, others say that he used a hunting knife, but anyway, it ended with Gabrielle having her arm amputated. Roch left her lying on the kitchen floor in horrendous pain until the next morning when the remaining stump was stitched up. On August 16th, Gabrielle managed to get off the property and made her way to the closest hospital. She tried to come up with an excuse that she had an arm missing, but the hospital called the police, realizing that something was seriously wrong. When the police showed up on Roch's doorstep 3 days later, they found no one. The compound was empty. 3 members fled with Roch, while others went back to their families after finally having enough. Police searched for Roch for 6 weeks before they found him at a hideout in Quebec. Charges were also brought against the other members of his cult for Gabrielle's amputation, which they all pled guilty to. Roch was handed 12 years in prison, and because Gabrielle escaped, the police also found out about the murder of Solange. Roch was also charged with the first-degree murder of Solange Boilard. The judge believed that there wasn't enough evidence that the murder was premeditated, so instead, Roch was tried for second-degree murder. In the end, he made a deal for more leniency. He pleaded guilty and no additional charges were brought against him. In 1993, Roch pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for the death of Solange Bollard and was sentenced to life imprisonment. In 2000, he was transferred to Dorchester Penitentiary, a medium-security prison in Dorchester, New Brunswick. In 2002, he was rejected for parole as he was considered too high a risk to reoffend and he never applied again. In 2009, he tried to sell his artwork on a United States-based website called murderauction.com, which called itself a true crime auction house and was willing to sell some of Roch's drawings and poetry. The Correctional Service of Canada prevented his works leaving Dorchester Penitentiary, and Stockwell Day, the Canadian Federal Public Safety Minister, at the time wrote to the Correctional Service to express concern that the killer was benefiting from work in prison. Even after being sentenced to life in prison and being in prison, some of his wives actually stayed loyal to him and he got them pregnant during conjugal visits, giving him 4 more children. Roch never finished his sentence because in 2011, aged 63, he was fatally stabbed by another inmate. On 26th of February 2011, Roch was found dead near his cell. His death is believed to be the result of an altercation with his cellmate Matthew Gerard MacDonald, a 60-year-old convicted murderer from Port au Port, Newfoundland and Labrador, who was charged with the killing. MacDonald pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and he was sentenced to life in prison, having already been serving a life sentence for a previous murder charge. MacDonald stabbed Roch in the neck with a sheave, walked to the guard station, handed them the weapon, and said, "That piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up." Experts view Roch as a violent psychopath with narcissistic tendencies. As a young man, minor criminal activity and substance abuse marked his path before becoming self-declared spiritual leader. He utilized manipulation, deception, and coercion to gain followers. At core, Roch displayed the classic traits of a cult leader who preys on followers to serve his ego. His psychopathy combined with narcissism drove him to devalue, control, and dehumanize members to gratify his sense of entitlement. He demanded excessive worship while callously exploiting his followers. Cut off from society and constantly manipulated, his followers became trapped under his pathology. According to cult experts, people who end up submitting control of their lives to authoritarian leaders often enter new religions during times of personal difficulty or crisis. Roch would specifically scout out followers dealing with trauma, family problems, or mental health issues. Many were just looking for some meaning because of the dissatisfaction with aspects of their childhood religious beliefs. Roch was looking for vulnerable people. Once immersed in his isolated camp, Roch's conditioning tactics worked to break down members' personal identities and resistance. Sleep deprivation, demanding physical labor, fasting, sexual control, and shame purged their ties to outside perspectives. Then, violent punishments and fear-compelled obedience. Cut off from support systems, followers became caught in a cycle of appeasing Roch's boundless authority. Also, Canada lacked specialized anti-cult programs or groups to monitor Roch's abusive practices during that time. Law enforcement and social services came late to recognizing the criminal extent happening on the land. Roch justified physically harming and controlling every aspect of members' lives under spiritual teachings, largely unchecked because of the societal indifference and also the geographical seclusion. Clinical evaluations of surviving members and children of the Anthill Kids determined that few had serious mental illness or instability that predisposed them to joining the cult. Most were average men and women, often raised as practicing Christians, who were gradually indoctrinated by Roch's distortions of familiar religious teachings. leaving family, careers, property, and social ties to move with the group physically isolated them within his sphere of control. While the Anthill kids displayed some unique dynamics and beliefs under Roch's control, social scientists classify them among the dangerous doomsday cults that have emerged worldwide. Several survivors went on to advocate for greater awareness of cult psychology and tell their stories to prevent further future tragedies. Today, one of the members, Gabrielle Lavallee, is a brilliant woman who gives conferences to young people to talk to them about self-esteem without hiding her faith. Gabrielle left home when she was 17 years old. She traveled a lot looking for answers to her existential questions. She didn't know who she was or what she was doing. Not being recognized or loved by her parents, she kind of needed to fill a void. She became a nurse and worked in Chicoutimi, Montreal, Paris, but her life was unstable. When she was 21 years old, she already had a failed relationship. Gabrielle didn't like herself, she didn't have confidence in herself, she felt that everything she touched just didn't work. She abandoned her nursing career, indulging in sex and drugs. It was during an event in the summer of 1977 that she felt a man's gaze on her. It was Roch, whom she still describes today as a man with incredible charisma. He just hypnotized her. Looking for love and recognition, she felt that he gave her that, so she joined him. After the horror that Gabrielle went through, she has now been able to forgive Roch and move on with her life. She is married and hopefully lives a full life. Sadly, I was not able to find any more info on baby Samuel or Solange, and I'm really sorry for that. As for Roch's first children, his boys from his first marriage, Francois, along with his brother, Roch Sylvain, they spoke about their father during an interview. Since the boys were young, they lived in horror. It began in 1980 when the young boys joined their father's commune in Quebec. Almost immediately, the boys were subjected to their father's violent, drunken, and sexual acts. Francois said, I was so scared of him when I was small. He would say my name and I would tremble like a leaf. When their father drank, his sons knew that he would pay them a visit. Francois and Roch Sylvain remembered the disemboweling of Solange Bollard. He was a shark, said Francois. He needed to see blood. In spite of their childhood, Francois and Roch Sylvain took back control of their lives. In 2009, they published a book about their experience. They said that talking publicly about their father frees them from the horrors they lived through. And even though the memories of their violent childhood will never leave them, they claim that they won't pass anything on to their children. My little girl was looking at me, said Francois, and I told her that she will never have to experience anything like that with me. And I'm sure that all of the members of the Anthill Kids cult, they have lasting, possible lifelong damages, physical and or psychological. I can only imagine and I can just assume that they must suffer from anxiety, depression, PTSD, but I truly hope that they are doing much better now. It's just such a horrific case, and it's mind-blowing that an adult can have so much control over other adults. This is what I will never understand about these cults. Most of the times the leaders, they come up with these ridiculous stories that when you hear them, it's clear they are not believable. But how do they end up convincing other people? I don't get it, and I don't think I will ever get it. How do they end up convincing other people when it's clear that the stories are just not believable? I don't know. You guys, please let me know what do you think in the comment section down below. For now, thanks for staying with me. Thanks for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video. And lastly, Happy New Year. Bye.